Hey folks, my name is Jen, and it's that time again. We are going to talk about some of the books that I read in 2025. So I'm thinking that we are going to try to start off the year with negativity and then move into positivity. So today's video is going to consist of me telling you about the worst books that I read last year. There weren't that many, thank goodness, but I did have about 5 on my worst list, and this year is rare because I actually don't have any dishonorable mentions. I had 0 DNFs last year, so nothing random disappointments to talk about, although I do have these disappointments to talk about. First 3 that I'm going to talk about, actually, well, all of them are disappointments, but the first 3 I'm going to talk about, honestly, are not necessarily that bad. I mean, in general, none of these books are honestly that bad if you really think about it. It's just, for me, they did not work out. They were not my particular cup of tea, or did not add anything to my existence in general. So they are not bad books, they were just the worst things that I happened to read this year. And the first 3 I'm going to talk about are probably the most disappointing ones, because they were all right, but they just were not, I guess, not up to what I was hoping they would be, really. Anyway, the least worst, the 5th worst book that I read this year was Good Stuff, A Reminiscence of My Father Cary Grant by Jennifer Grant. To put a memoir on this list, wow. But, I mean, I wanted to read this because I thought it was so sweet. This idea of Cary Grant's daughter writing about growing up with her famous dad, I thought that was such a sweet idea and sounded so cute. And I mean, Cary Grant, we all know him, or at least most people know of him. He was a fantastic actor. He was in so many, like, wicked, good, famous movies, and always seemed like such a charmer. And I am a particular fan of a lot of his movies. And I thought, well, this should be a good time learning more about him. I also have another biography about him, but because this is a personal memoir by his daughter, I thought, oh, this is going to be even better than that biography that I haven't read yet. The thing is, I learned something when I was in college, especially when I was working in nonfiction writing workshop, and that was that sometimes there are some topics that you are just a little close to be able to write about them properly. And it honestly is a problem a lot of the time with, I believe, people who attempt to write memoirs where they are just a little bit too close to a topic, or things are just a little bit, they're not able to separate themselves enough to write well about something. And I think that might have been part of the problem here with this book, is that I think in some cases maybe she is a little too close to the topic of her dad to be able to write about him, which that's totally fine. You know, that is totally a fine place to be. But it's just the tone of this book overall, I think, is what ultimately suffered really with this, because between being extremely defensive in some chapters about her dad, and then in other cases it being a long, almost stream of conscious sort of writing and reminiscences. Like she says, a reminiscence of her dad. A lot of things did take on this kind of stream of consciousness style of writing where things really skipped all over the place, even though she did try to have it in like certain sections and things like that. It wasn't a very linear narrative, really. It was kind of a little bit all over the place. And also, like I said, the tone in some places was a bit too defensive, and in others extremely privileged, and more in like a negative way of that. A lot of name dropping, a lot of talking about certain memories and lots of experiences that she had as a kid growing up with her dad. And I don't honestly think that's really how she meant to come across. She was just talking about his friendship with the Prince and Princess of Monaco, but and shit like that, but it just ended up coming across as really, I don't know, whiny rich girl complains about life while at the same time reminiscing about how great her life was. I don't know. It just bothered me overall the way this was written, and I think that's kind of unfortunate because I believe she actually is a writer. Like that's her chosen career, is writing. But I think maybe she should have used another editor or somebody to help her a little bit with tone overall with this, because it just did not feel like like a very well written memoir. It just felt a little bit all over the place, and also too much rich people and their rich little lives. I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit jaded at this juncture, and this is not really the right type of book for me at this point, but I don't know, I was ultimately kind of disappointed with how this was written. And that brings me to number 4. Another disappointment in how some things were written was Howl and Other Poems by Allen Ginsberg. I was really looking forward to reading this collection of poetry. This was on the list of banned books that I wanted to read in 2025. I have heard about this collection before, and I thought that I had read some of Allen Ginsberg's poetry before, up until the point of actually reading this collection, and now I'm questioning if I got him confused with another poet from around the same time period, because I did not really enjoy this at all, which was pretty unfortunate. But again, it's not really anything necessarily about this particular poet, I guess. It's more me and the things that I enjoy or don't enjoy, really. And unfortunately, this particular style of poetry is not something that I enjoy. I think it's technically kind of like a beat poetry, or he was kind of part of the beat poetry movement. I haven't honestly read too much in there. It's a subgenre of poetry that's kind of a hit or a miss for me, but this was definitely a miss. There were a couple of lines here and there that I thought were interesting, and there was one poem that I really liked. A Supermarket in California. I did kind of really like that one, and yeah, like I said, there are a couple of lines here and there in poems where I thought that was something profound was said, something funny, something really interesting. The poem America, I thought, had a lot in it that was really interesting, but overall I didn't really jive with this. And I did look up some things about this collection. There are people that he's mentioned in here, and I wanted to understand who these people were and what was talked about and everything. So I did end up looking a little bit more, and it looks like somebody he mentioned in one of these poems, there was a controversy about him talking about this person without their express permission. He's just putting them on blast in his poetry collection, and I think it's one thing to call out, I don't know, authority figures are real shitheads, you know, in your writing. I think that's one thing, but I think it's another thing entirely to take someone you met, especially in the situation that Allen Ginsberg apparently met this gentleman, and just kind of lying or exaggerating about him and just putting his business out there for the world. I feel like that is ultimately disrespectful, and not something as a writer you should really be doing. You know, you want to harm people that are doing harm, that's fine. But don't come for just random people that you encounter in life who didn't do anything to you. You know, that's not great. It shows a lack of integrity, to be completely honest. Besides that fact, I didn't really like the overall feeling of these poems. I think I described it in my, what was it, my January wrap-up, I believe? Because I think I read this last January. I think I'd said something along the lines of how I pictured Allen Ginsberg writing these poems, and it basically was a guy dressed in the kind of beat garb of the day, hanging out in an empty boxcar and just scribbling away at these poems and feeling so proud of himself and how edgy he is. That's kind of how I pictured this collection being written, like Allen Ginsberg being a fucking edgelord. Which, unfortunate, again. So, yeah, this was, like I said, disappointing, ultimately, to me, because I was looking forward to this collection, both as a famous poet, a famous collection that has been banned. You know, I was ultimately looking forward to it, and ultimately was pretty disappointed with it. So, now, the third worst book that I read. Oh, unfortunately, it was a romance novel. I haven't talked about one of those in a little while on my worst reads, huh? That romance novel was My Roommate is a Vampire, and it's by Jenna Levine. So, this is, it started out promising, right? This is about an artist who desperately needs a place to live. Like, she's looking for somewhere that she can ultimately afford. And she sees this ad by this guy who is looking for a roommate. And I believe it's in, like, a really nice neighborhood in, like, Chicago. I don't know if it's considered... See, in Boston it would be the Brownstones, and I don't think it's that, but just think of it in that way. Like, a brownstone neighborhood, like, fancy, all that. So she moves in with this guy. It is a gorgeous, really old apartment. And her new roommate, the girl's name is Cassie. Her new roommate, Frederick, is kind of weird. Well, the thing about Frederick is the reason he was looking for a roommate is because he is a vampire. and he was looking for someone who was more modern, because not only is he a vampire, he's a vampire that recently woke up from a coma he has been in since the turn of the 20th century. So the last time he was rocking out amongst people, it was like pre-World War II. I think it was around World War One, maybe post World War One, and like, cars were barely a thing. Telephones were not that common. And now he's looking around, people are fucking FaceTiming each other in Starbucks. Like, he doesn't know what's going on. So he needs a modern person to kind of interact with and to help him ease into and fit in more with the modern life, so he doesn't expose himself as being a vampire, because I guess vampire hunters are still generally a thing that exists out there in the world. The thing is that Cassie ends up discovering, hey, he is indeed a vampire because he's got a fridge full of blood bags. Great job, dude. Shenanigans ensue. They decide to continue to be roommates with each other. They're also both interested in each other. There you go. It sounded promising to me initially. I was looking for a really good vampire romance. I had been reading some really good monster ones. I read a couple of great dragon things. I read a awesome werewolf romance. I was like, damn, I am back in my shape-shifting, paranormal, spicy jam. I want a great vampire novel to go along with this. And I think maybe because I was putting this on such a high pedestal of this is going to be an amazing vampire romance, maybe that's why the disappointment hit me so hard, because it was not really what I was looking for. Frederick is weird, right? He's an old dude, and I think the problem with him ultimately is that he starts off completely one way. You know, he's kind of awkward, but he's gentlemanly, but he's like, you know, very respectful and everything with Cassie, but the minute they are like getting ready to bone down, he just does a complete 180 on his personality. And that's not to say that someone can't act the opposite of what they act in real life in the bedroom. Like, that's not to say that people don't, like, change things up in how they behave, but I'm saying that he went from Mr. Darcy level of awkward and respectful to fucking Christian Grey within 2 seconds. And that's beyond just a switching things up in the bedroom kind of behavior. That is a complete change in personality. And I just don't think that was handled so well. It kind of honestly felt like his attitude about things was maybe some kind of plot device or something. Like, he had to be so careful, and then, well, we can't have him be careful anymore because we need the boning to happen, so suddenly he's got to turn into Mr. Dominant, and it felt really weird, and like the author didn't particularly know her character that well because he switched so much. So I wasn't particularly into that. My problem through most of the book, though, was honestly Cassie. Cassie is supposed to be like 30 and she does not act 30 at all. And I can say this with some amount of expertise as someone who is in their 30s. This girl, not a 30-year-old, is this one. Her maturity level, honestly, she felt more like she might be in her early 20s. And there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest, but I do wish that the author had adjusted her age accordingly, because I don't act the same way that I did when I was 22, which is not the same way I acted when I was 15. Just not the same way that I'll act when I'm in my 50s, hopefully. I have no idea. But I'm just saying that we evolve as people, and even though you ultimately are the same person, you handle things slightly differently as you experience life more, and things happen, and you know, shit. And hopefully at some point you mature a little bit more than you were previously. And she did not read like a believable 30-year-old. She read 100% like she was at least in her early 20s. Just the level of maturity, how awkward she was, how she handled everything and anything, pretty much. She did not read like she was in her 30s at all. If she was, she would definitely be a person I wouldn't hang around, because what the fuck is wrong with you? But, I mean, yeah. So she was not really believable to me at all either. But you know what? I was keeping up with this book. I was still continuing on through it because I was waiting on that spice. I was waiting on things to get really good. Still dealing with it. And then the last third of the novel happened. And I have to say, I won't get into specifics because I don't ultimately want to spoil anything for you if this is a book that does sound kind of interesting to you and you want to check it out for yourself. But let's just say the third act issue happened. Typically in romance novels, you know, it'll be the third act breakup. It was not a third act breakup, but it was the third act conflict, essentially. And it was so overly dramatic and ridiculous. Honestly, that section, there were a couple of chapters in there that I ended up having to like flip back through and read it again just so I could confirm that I had read what I thought I read, because it didn't make any fucking sense. This situation itself felt very overly dramatic, and honestly kind of stupid, and the ultimate resolution to it was so miraculously brought about. It was, oh my god, it was also stupid and anticlimactic, and again, made no logical fucking sense. It really felt like I had genuinely kind of wasted my time with this book, ultimately, which is really unfortunate. I wanted to like this. I thought maybe this was gonna be really good, but with that ending, with nothing making sense, with this perfect resolution tied up in a pretty bow, but again, didn't make any fucking sense and was overly dramatic to boot, and it's so anticlimactic in its resolution that I didn't care that how the ending came about. I wasn't satisfied with it. I'm sure the intent was for it to be satisfying, but to me it was just kind of like, I don't care, because I stopped caring about these characters in this world pretty much partway through that conflict. Like, this is my disbelief with, we have gone beyond that. So yeah, ultimately unfortunate, and probably going to be an unhauled book because I will not be reading it again. And the second of the worst books, number 2, was The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. So this is a book that is actually a writing program, essentially. It is a spiritual path to higher creativity. A writing program in which you sit down for like, what is it, 12 weeks, I believe? Yes, 12 weeks, and you read through this book, you do the activities, the prompts, keep a journal, do all these things, and it is supposed to help you ultimately to access your creativity. Whether that is through writing, filmmaking, dance, art, acting, anything creative. Basically, this is supposed to help you get back to your creative roots. Back to when you were a kid or whatever, and you got into these things and you did them with abandon, and then slowly your family and the world shat on everything and then squeezed the creativity out of you, essentially. And this is a full writing program to get back to the beginning. So it goes through, I'll just tell you quickly the weeks. Week 1, recovering a sense of safety. Week 2, recovering a sense of identity, so who you are and who you are as a creative. Week 3, recovering a sense of power, accessing your anger, and all that jazz. Week 4, recovering a sense of integrity. Week 5, recovering a sense of possibility. 6, recovering a sense of abundance. Week 7, recovering a sense of connection. 8, recovering a sense of strength. 9, recovering a sense of compassion. 10, recovering a sense of self-protection. 11, recovering a sense of autonomy. And 12, recovering a sense of faith. You work through all of these, and apparently it's the answer to your non-denominational prayers or whatever. So I read this because I had heard from multiple people, both in my life and people who are not in my life, but that I admire a lot, that this was a great tool. And even though at the time when I picked this up, I was not having any writer's block. I was actually writing a lot at the time. I still thought to myself, you know what? That might not be a bad idea. Because ultimately, I go through stages of writing a lot, and then something happens and I stop writing for a little bit. So I figured, you know what? It would be good to get back to basics. I've really been thinking a lot over the past year or so of going through my writing books again, which I think not really so much last year, but the year before, I really started rereading some of my textbooks from college and working with them and trying to take writing advice from them and everything. Like that idea of going back to school to kind of help me actually finish something. So I thought this is gonna be pretty good because maybe that can help motivate me to get around to actually like doing this, That was not ultimately what I got when I picked this up. I got writer's block when I finished this stupid writing program. It had essentially frustrated me so much that I couldn't fucking write a damn thing for I don't know, 5-6 months. Yeah, not great. The daily journal was definitely something that was really hard to keep up with. There's certain prompts and questions and things that you're supposed to write about, but you're also supposed to fill 3 pages with writing and do it like a stream of conscious kind of thing, and I am not very good at that, to be completely honest. Eventually I just started writing poetry instead of actual writing anything, because nothing was coming out otherwise. Some of this was hard to really get through. Part of it is because this is so dated. This is the 25th anniversary edition. This book was originally published, I believe, in the early 90s, and in some places it definitely shows its age. It reminds me a lot of another kind of psychological self-help text that I read from around the same time. They all have this certain way they're written that I find hard to describe, but you'd know it if you read it. Certain psychological texts from like the late 80s, early 90s, they have a certain feel to them, and that definitely had that. Not exactly a pleasant feel to them either. Besides being a little bit outdated, I also found it to be a little bit out of touch. How Julia Cameron was writing about things, certain things that you're supposed to do, certain things that you're supposed to write about. One prompt was like, list your favorite cars. Okay, cars I can't afford? Sure, whatever. She had a lot of things like that, and a lot of dates you are supposed to take with yourself, creative dates you are supposed to take with yourself, and she was really harping on getting out and doing stuff, or buying all of these supplies for little crafty things that you do for yourself. And it's like, lady, in this fucking economy, like, I don't think so. Little dates with myself. I can barely stand around to be around myself when I'm not distracted by something. Like, why would I want to go on dates with myself? But, you know, and that might sound terrible, but that's something that I need to work out in therapy. I am not gonna do it for a little self-help writing book like this. Besides the fact that, again, in this economy, I am not going to go out to Panera every single week to take myself on a goddamn date. Like, fuck that. Who has that time and money? And she also just, she wanted you to basically Marie Kondo your closet at one point, and it's like, girl, I absolutely not. As it is, half the pants I own have holes in them. Like, I'm not going to get rid of everything that doesn't spark joy. I have clothes. I'm not getting rid of them. Fuck you. There are just some things in here that did just honestly feel kind of out of touch and a little bit annoying to come from her. Someone who, like, she's written screenplays and stuff. She's rich. Her brother created fucking Avatar, for God's sakes. Like, I don't honestly want to hear about improving my life from some rich fuck who doesn't know what it's like to be middle class. Like, I was just not having it, essentially. The other thing that I really struggled with in here were the religious, not even religious undertones, the religious, like, stuff slapping you in the face. And she says in the beginning of the book, she is using the term God, but you can use whatever you want. It's like a higher power thing. But you know what? I try to separate myself from that. I try to just kind of set that aside and go, okay, right, she doesn't mean God as in the Christian God, she just means like the higher power kind of thing, and I try to separate that. Honestly, it got harder and harder to separate that at all the further I got in this book, especially in a couple of the weeks where the language she was using regarding a deity figure and spirituality in general was extremely Christianity focused. Like, as someone who was raised Catholic, and I think not only if you're raised Catholic, if you're raised in Christianity at all, there are certain markers, certain phrases, certain things that are written that you can pick up on easily as this, oh, this is meaning blah blah blah, and that kind of thing. And they were definitely a lot of phrasing and things that she used which were 100% not New Age-y at all, 100% based in Christianity. And that was not what I was looking for in this book at all. I'm all for connecting with a higher power, with the universe and whatnot, but I didn't want some backdoor Christianity trying to pretend to be New Agey to teach me anything about writing. I was not pleased. So ultimately, because of how infuriating this was at different points, and also because it gave me, like I said, writer's block, which really sucked because I was chugging along perfectly well prior to this stupid thing. Yeah, I hated this. It made me really mad. I would not recommend it, unless maybe you don't have any problem with the religion, then maybe you'll be fine with it. I don't know. But yeah, ultimately, I didn't have a good time with it. And you might be asking yourself, wow, you got really heated about that. How is there possibly anything that you hate more than that book? Well, it would have to be the one book that I gave 2 stars last year, and that was The Lady Who Liked Clean Restrooms by J.P. Dunleavy. This is also known as the chronicle of one of the strangest stories ever to be rumored about around New York. So this is a very short book, which is why I didn't DNF it, because it is so very short. This is following, her name is Jocelyn Guinevere Marchantier Jones. Her husband cheats on her. Her kids side with her husband and think she's crazy for some reason, which to that I say disown the whole fucking bunch, whatever. And she ends up having to go out on her own. She can't survive off of riches anymore when she doesn't really have them, so she has to get out there and try to survive and get a job. And it's again about, man, I'm not very pleased with rich people this year, I guess. A rich person having to surprise work for a living or get out there amongst in her life or whatever, and I don't have any sympathy for her, I guess. I mean, I feel bad for her in the sense that her husband cheated on her with his secretary, which is also like, bro, how unimaginative are you? At least cheat with somebody entertaining. Your secretary? That's played out. All she wants, wandering around the city, all she wants is to find someone who can give her a clean restroom. Like, that's all she is looking for. She wants to find a clean restroom in which to do her business, and she is wandering around New York City looking for that exactly. And she goes to a lot of different places. There's like a museum, there's a funeral home, there's a few other places where she uses their best restrooms, and they're not disgusting, I guess. Speaking of stream of consciousness, this is also written in a stream of consciousness manner, which I think is also another strike against it in my book, because I hate stream of conscious writing. It is so displeasing to me. It is not only displeasing, it is confusing, and I did not enjoy the writing of this. The humor in here was not a big fan of. I have also seen people talk about this, because I went online after I finished reading this to see what other people thought about it, because I was like, please tell me I'm not the only one who didn't understand what the hell was up with this book. And Happily, I was not the only one, thank goodness, who didn't know what the fuck was going on. Although there were a lot of people that said this is the funniest thing they've ever read, which to me is like, what else do you think is funny? There was one part in here that I was slightly entertained by, and that was pretty short-lived, to be completely honest, because of how annoying everything else was. Every single person in this book was a terrible person. Legitimately, every single person was a terrible person. Which also did not, it just kind of added to the negativity I felt overall about this book, rather than, you know, make me feel any differently about it. Not only that, but it did a couple of things that were unforgivable to me. One of which is, this is a dude who doesn't know how to write women. And I know that's something that has been a topic, especially recently, here on BookTube, of more in the vein of making fun of guys who don't know how to write women, and it being like pretty silly and ridiculous all the time. But this genuinely does not know how to write women at all. And I can say that as someone who is a woman. This guy, no. And besides the fact that he does not know how to write women, the major factor in him not knowing women, not knowing how to write them, first of all, and secondly, apparently not fucking understanding them at all, is he writes about the main character desiring to be raped. I'm sorry. We all have our kinks. We all have our things. And I know that that play does it for a lot of people, but there is a certain amount of control that is still held by the woman within that. I don't know if it's technically classified under a BDSM thing. I guess maybe it would be technically classified under that, but it would have to be done very carefully, very planned out, confirmations and safe words and everything figured out with a partner prior to anything. That is whatever. But no woman ever in the history of anything genuinely wants someone to come in and rape her. Fuck you. Fuck you so hard. What the fuck is wrong with you? And how dare you write about shit like that? That is just, ooh, it made me mad. Which is why this is at number 1, as opposed to the other one that also made me increasingly mad. And it is because, besides the fact that this was not funny, terribly confusing, and ultimately I think fucking pointless, I'm also really pissed at this guy who thinks he can write women and dares to say shit like that. Fuck you, J.P. Dunleavy. I will never be reading anything that you have written ever again. And this is one book that I can't recommend at all. So yeah, that was everything that I read last year that I did not have a good time with. My 5 worst books of the year. I hope you enjoyed hearing about them. If you like any of them and you're mad at me right now, I'm sorry. But opinions are like nipples and everybody has them. And these just happen to be mine. I'm sure there are books that you hate that I like. So, it's tit for tat. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you have read these and also didn't like them, or if you did, let me know your thoughts down below. And I will see you guys in the next video.